Hello and welcome to today's edition of Extraordinary Outcomes. I'm Shubhanjan Sarkar, your host and founder of Pitchling, the buyer-seller engagement platform. In our show today, we speak with Roger Mader, co-founder and managing partner of Ampersand, our news roundup from the world of sales, SaaS, and startups in NS3, and finally, Ross Schaefer on 30 seconds to customer experience greatness. Let's dive right in. First, the news in NS3.
In this bulletin, AT Internet and Piano create customer experience platform. FounderPath raises $10 million to expand SaaS lending platform. Overseas listings IPOs become easier for Indian startups. Microsoft announces new Dynamics 365 capabilities. Piano, the global subscription commerce and customer experience platform, has joined forces with AT Internet, a leader in digital analytics and contextual data. Their platform combines a digital analytics solution with journey orchestration and personalized commerce. The company's solutions are already serving as the backbone of hundreds of major digital publishing and media brands, including BBC, Deutsche Telekom, NBC Sports, The Wall Street Journal, and The Weather Company. Austin-based FounderPath, which helps SaaS companies increase cash flow without diluting ownership, raised $10 million in debt as the company approaches approving $1 million in loans weekly. FounderPath helps SaaS companies by offering loans based on their monthly recurring revenue and a SaaS credit score. The new capital comes from other entrepreneurs such as Pat Condon, co-founder of Rackspace, David Hauser, co-founder of Grasshopper, Bill Boebel, co-founder of Webmail, and Clarity FM founder Dan Martell. The Ministry of Corporate Affairs has clarified that Indian tech companies that list on overseas stock exchanges would not be considered as listed companies in India. Until now, companies that raised funds on overseas stock exchanges were subject to stringent Indian rules and regulations. These include disclosures on a quarterly basis on financial performance as well as corporate governance. From now on, companies listed abroad would not need to comply with these norms. Microsoft has introduced new capabilities for Microsoft Dynamics 365, its CRM platform. These include real-time customer journey orchestration and real-time survey capabilities. Deep integration with Microsoft Azure Synapse Analytics will help to build custom AI models for advanced segmentation and targeting. These capabilities will enable teams to improve relevancy, personalize customer experiences across digital and physical touchpoints, and build customer trust through the platform. Thank you for watching. All links are also available in the show notes. If you have news about sales, SaaS, or your startup, share it with us at ns3@pitch.link. See you next time.
Meet Roger Mader, co-founder and managing partner of Ampersand, where he practices growth by design. From an early career on the launch teams for the IBM personal computer and first generation of Accenture's change management practice, Roger co-founded Via International and built a global growth strategy, organization design, and change management consultancy. He guided strategy and new service design for Ernst & Young. He served as SVP Global Accounts in the consulting practice for Business Objects, now SAP, led global accounts for design strategy firm Dublin Monitor, now Deloitte, and led commercial strategy for innovation agency Fahrenheit 212, now Capgemini. He also served as the global chief marketing officer for Subway. Roger has been retained by CEO Trevor Haynes to craft brand purpose and architecture, reorganize the marketing function, elevate and integrate digital channels, and transform brand communication for the world's largest franchise restaurant enterprise.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for what you can later judge as being my expertise in the sales process. But I'm delighted to discuss it with you because I do find that it is always changing, and we make the mistake of believing it to be predictable when in fact it is very fluid, like any other human dance. It is a very fluid exercise. And I think increasingly complex because of the different aspirations of the different participants in the process, who can also regularly be changing, even in the same transaction.
Yes.
So, yes, more than happy to do that.
The first question that I have for you is that I believe that the buyer who was engaging with the salesperson 20 years back, with whatever information sources he had, whatever requirements he had, and so on, and the relationships he had at the ground level with the salesperson has completely changed. And today the buyer is actually more informed, more empowered with information than a single salesperson is, and thereby that this whole information asymmetry, which used to be the reason of engagement, has vanished. I mean, like so many other things in the internet.
It has not vanished. It has changed considerably. Let me give you an example that is, potentially unique to the bizarre open market of healthcare in the United States. To try and give it a kind of consumer perspective for our listeners that we can all relate to, if you've ever seen the news items on from our increasingly crazy country about the challenges that people have in seeking out healthcare, what you'll find is the information asymmetry of the past meant that the doctor was the expert, the patient arrived and did as the doctor told them. Today, what you find is that people are informed or misinformed, very often deeply flawed in their interpretation of information because they don't have, an advanced degree to understand and interpret it. They don't have the nuance of experience in something that is as fluid as medical sciences. And they don't appreciate the fact that doctors don't actually know the answers and don't pretend to. They have to navigate their way by testing, seeking out pain, trying to understand cause, prescribe something, see if it works, call me in the morning, and we'll try the next thing. So patients who are under the mistaken belief that they have the answer and know what needs to be done end up being like Elvis Presley and Michael Jackson and prescribing their own solutions. And having a complacent and compliant doctor for that does not end up well for the patient or the doctor. So I think there is information asymmetry, but it is not as simple as I didn't know it before, now I know it. And we have seen a very similar parallel in the West. I'd be interested to know if this has happened in India. I'm sure it's happened in lots of different markets. But again, another consumer example would be the way that we used to shop for an automobile in the United States was that you would get basically managed by the sales rep who had the power and was, there were a small number of brands. You pretty much knew the brand that fit you, and you would go into the shop and the salesperson's job was to upsell you. And everyone knew that that was a strong arm tactic and hated it. Over time, more brands proliferated, alternatives proliferated, single price options arrived. Lexus arrived in the United States under a different model entirely and transformed the purchase experience, where they basically designed a beautiful line of cars, but their breakthrough was in coming to the US was they designed the luxury car for people who don't care about cars and optimized everything around the service experience and did brilliant things that Toyota as a continuous improvement company would do, like they paid their sales reps on the second car that you purchased. You get bonus on the second car, not the first, so that there was a built-in series of mechanisms that would encourage you as a sales representative to build a relationship, to ensure high service, et cetera. And they have to this day some of the most loyal, some of the highest brand loyalty largely driven by service and not by the car. So what do we take from these couple of examples into the B2B space? What we see is a pivot to buyer power. The buyers come in with greater authority, and sometimes misinformed in their sense of authority. The other challenge is that the buyer is now equipped with a slew of partners. For a large enough amount, you might go through a multi-tier approval system. Each of the participants in that decision have different criteria that you have to meet. So you're threading the needle between I'm selling for quality here, I'm selling for cost over there, and everything in between, service and long-term value and immediate value. And very often those participants are invisible to you if you have not tried to make them explicit. This is why long-term relationships help so much, because you begin to learn the players, you begin to learn the gauntlet you have to run, you understand the measures that help your buyers win so you can optimize for that. It's a little bit like writing your own RFP, request for proposal, by over time understanding the purchase game, if you will. So I see that as the increasing sophistication and the growth in options. Both have taken power away from the seller and put it in the hands of the buyer. 30 years ago, the Miller-Hyman method was a smart idea, which basically said understand all the buyers and understand their preferences. More recently, consultative selling, which is a different label for much the same thing. All of them I see as teaching us to operate like a good doctor, which is why I used the medical example before. Our job is to diagnose the pain and then to prescribe a solution. So if you step into this relationship with the unbiased desire to improve the health of your patient, that you are now no longer flogging the product that you sell. You are now diagnosing need. And now you're an expert in the particular product you sell, but if you were really their advocate, you might even send them to a competitor. There would be times, if you were completely unbiased, that you would say, you know what, you're buying a Mercedes and you really only need, a low-end Subaru for the features that you're looking for. Are you sure you want the Mercedes? I will be happy to sell you the Mercedes, but it's going to come at a margin and there'll be these differences. And I need to make sure that those differences are justified in the cost. You'll win loyalty, you'll earn respect, you'll get referrals to the people who are really in the market for Mercedes from that person. That's the challenge, that you are foregoing possibly today's sale in order to have two sales tomorrow.
I totally agree. In fact, it's very strange you say this, because I actually shared a piece of advice today with a community, and I said, if you cannot fulfill the entire need of a customer, the best thing is to walk away. However, I have a question, and this comes up quite a few times. We talk about this, that we should be able to diagnose the pain, right? And I think that's a very ambitious statement, because
it's fair.
The buyers, the role has changed, because they no longer are the pure procurement guys who are only there to negotiate with you. They are subject matter experts themselves. They possibly have gone to the same engineering schools or management schools that the salesperson has gone to. And not only that, the buyer is not alone. They, as you rightly again pointed out, that there are multiple people in a decision having multiple agendas, whether it's cost, whether it is stack compatibility, tech compatibility, usability, so on and so forth. I mean, everybody is driving at different metrics, and you are threading the needle to ensure that all of them are aligned. How do you reconcile this? Because when I'm talking to people, these are guys who are not only talking to this particular salesperson, he's actually talking to 3 other vendors he has shortlisted. And there are smart people there as well who are trying to do the exactly same thing. So he's learning very, very quickly, as well as he has access to experts internally, and they have access to experts who are quote unquote neutral parties, right? Who are subject matter experts, who are walking in and saying, okay, this is the ERP that you should be going for, or these are the criterions that should be part of your RFP, and so on, right? So how do you then become the preferred doctor or the person who is going to diagnose? How do you get there?
So let's use the three different ERP systems as your base example. I think there's several elements of the process, not necessarily sequential steps. One is know the competition. And I think all good sales folks know that they need to be able to compare and contrast. You need to be able to line up the three systems, show the features that the customer cares about, show why yours is beneficially positioned. And I think be prepared to, your competitors are going to point out your weaknesses. So better for you to address them first and talk about how you address them. And bring a big name client into the conversation, their name into the conversation to show how they've addressed that and why it's really not an issue. I think the other great benefit you can bring is the wisdom of your past clients who've already installed your ERP system, who've run into the issues that they're concerned about and have addressed them. And if you have a testimonial, and particularly in our lives now where we are operating through screens, you can throw up a video immediately and have the voice of the customer helping to assuage their concerns. I do personally find that having references that I can call upon in order to testify on behalf of my solution is very helpful because, obviously our buyers are interested in the perceptions of their peers for the same reason that when we buy online, we want to see other customers' reviews. And we don't, in B2B, we seldom make that available to them unless they're buying online.
This is a great point. We talk of building trust, and I have this point I make every time that 95% of all sales tech uses customers' behavior tracking surreptitiously. They don't take permission. They're not saying that I'm tracking what you're watching. I'm not, but I'm reporting to you. I'm not, they don't say I'm going to tell your vendor who you have shared this deck with, but they sell it to the vendor because the vendor is paying as a feature, as a you will know who all it has been shared with and so on. I think there's a fundamental disconnect about how we are going about building trust, and also that we feel that building trust is cheap and easy.
Right. So there are two features in that very useful insight that occurred to me. One is that trust is built on truth. Truth is best displayed through transparency. Yes. So what you've just described is I've created an opaque relationship where I'm using you and not telling you. You are like the worst date ever. You basically have just described the characteristics of a stalker. Yeah. So no one wants to date that guy. Yeah. And so if you're going to exhibit those behaviors, you should expect that you will have the same outcomes as a stalker. You will capture your prey now, and you will be hunted by the police later, because it's just a really poor transaction model to use. I don't mean to describe it as so nefarious, but it is literally the way that the sales business has thought about itself forever. The profession has thought about itself as hunting prey.
Yeah.
It's literally, it is literally like I'm going to shoot a mammal and eat it for dinner. For God's sake, no one wants to be the deer in this scenario. The other thing that I wanted to our sales professionals to consider listening to the show is that the sales reps at Lexus didn't choose to be paid on the second sale. Many of them had come from other dealerships and found this aggravating. So wait, I'm not going to get a bonus for maybe years? What are you talking? So what Lexus had to do was pay them a higher base and have a smaller bonus. Very different, a more expensive model for Lexus to operate. But it was machining trust into the mechanism. But the reps wouldn't have done it themselves. And my point is, we need leaders to step up and say, if we believe that we should have trusted relationships, then let's stop rewarding our reps to create distrustful relationships.
Yes.
If you do not make the mechanism match your objectives, you're going to go off the road. And it's your own doing. And sales leaders fail to recognize this all the time. By the way, I also think in a very sexist way against men. I think this is also indicative of testosterone poisoning, that there is a very male agenda that has informed sales forever, comes with this hunter and prey kind of methodology that is not about authentic relationships. And I expect, I don't have data to prove this, but I expect that as you find an increasing number of women as senior leaders in sales organizations, what you will find is a greater transparency, trust, long-standing relationships, and all the indications of trusted relationships in place, because they are not raised on the model of hunt and kill.
I'll talk to a few leaders in sales who are women, and I'm going to sort of probe this with them, this idea, because I can totally get it. Women come from nurturing, right? So that's I mean, again, this is a sexist kind of statement, but
the women I know are more nurturing than the men I know. Let's put it that way. That's just fact. That's just fact-based data.
Yes.
Might not be descriptive of the entire world.
True. I agree. Yeah, and there are always exceptions. I mean, there's no two ways about it. So that brings me to the question of how you are seeing buyers actually evolving. What is, I mean, right. you are doing some very innovative work, and you are actually challenging yourself and your customers to think differently, right? And thereby attain success or whatever they're trying to do. What kind of reactions, what is resonating with the buyers according to you today?
So I have operated on both sides of the transaction. I have been a consultant my entire life, really, my entire professional life, starting in big consulting with Accenture, and I worked in strategy with EY, and then I've had my own consulting firms, one in the last century and ampersand in the current, and I also recently had the opportunity to serve one of my clients as their global chief marketing officer, where I was receiving, lots of sales pitches from agencies and software makers and mobile device manufacturers and mobility trackers and all the things that you would expect would be necessary for gaining insight into consumers and understanding how to build a transaction with them. This was with Subway, the global sandwich shop, if you will, yes. The world's largest restaurant franchise. And I tell you, as the global chief marketing officer for one of the biggest consumer brands in the world and most familiar ones, you get a lot of phone calls. You get a lot of pitches. And what I found almost invariably was someone made a hammer and they were coming to sell me a hammer. They didn't care if I used nails for anything. We have the best hammer you've ever seen. And I was like, hello, did I ask for a hammer? Do I even talk to you about fastening boards together? What are you talking about? The better version was the hammer manufacturer who contacted me, often through a trusted source, and said, I'd like to talk to you about how you fasten boards together. Some people use nails, some people use screws, but somehow you got to, and they will be worthy of engaging in a conversation because they might have something. They might know something I don't. And at the end of that, if they learn that I fasten boards with screws and they're selling hammers, they will go back to their boss and say, 9 times out of 10, when I'm trying to sell a hammer, my clients need a screwdriver. We should probably sell screwdrivers too. We should probably build a partnership with the screwdriver manufacturing company. We should, at the very least, not sell hammers to people who are going to pound screws into wood. Because we're not going to be well received. We're going to have terrible reviews. Our sales will go down next year, not this year. And it is very few, in my experience, sales representatives who have the power, the authority, the agency to have that upward conversation. So what I would do sometimes is do that for them. If I saw someone coming to me with a bad idea, I'd say, no, I'm not interested in your hammer. Do you sell screwdrivers? No, you don't sell screwdrivers. You should go have this conversation with your boss. Come back to me when you sell screwdrivers. I'm not interested. Sorry for the simplistic analogy, but I can't really go into the details of Subway's purchasing. And the next thing that happens is I get a phone call from, or a request for a meeting from the head of the hammer company who wants to talk, who says thank you and wants to talk about screwdrivers and, what would the best screwdriver look like for you? And if they're really enterprising, they don't start making screwdrivers. They go build a partnership with whoever makes them best, and they get a cut of that deal, and they create the introductions. And now all of a sudden, they've got a consortium solution that is truly solving my problem, not selling me hammers, which is going to fail all day. That person who makes that, who elevates the conversation and solves my problem is almost always, in my experience, a founder of the company. It is a person who is still an entrepreneur. When it's a big company and that founder is, long gone or 3 steps away from the sales rep, there's no access to someone who's willing to change the program to meet the needs of the customer. And so one of the reasons why, as a consultant, I work with both big companies and small is because the big companies have so much to learn from still being entrepreneurial and scrappy and listening and pivoting. And it's very hard for them to do because of entrenched assets and systems. But the small companies are so disadvantaged by not having scale that they need partnerships, they need access, they need channel fluidity. And so there is, I think for many of our audience, there is a real opportunity to just step into the next sales conversation trying to be a good doctor. This is really my primary observation about a fundamental error of human nature, that we are selfish beasts, that if I have a hammer and I sell hammers, I think about me first, and I think about the hammer second, and I think about you third. How can I sell a hammer to Sabanjan? That is not the question to pose. The question is, put the hammer down, think about Sabanjan first, and ask, what does he need? And how can I help him achieve that? And oh my God, I have a hammer. I wonder if that could be helpful. That's a very, very counterintuitive exercise to have. And the only people well trained in this are, in my experience, healthcare professionals, because they don't know what tool to use until they understand the problem to solve. So their whole mechanism is around this deep empathy and understanding to start the conversation. The last thing you want is to go to an orthopedic surgeon. No matter what your problem is, the answer is going to be, I'm cutting and starting to use a hammer. You want an objective diagnostician. And that's, I think, the best position we can put ourselves in.
How early did sales folks get to you? I mean, one is that, okay, there is a floated RFP, people are calling you, or people are trying to reach out to you when there is some signal out there in the market that, okay, Subway is looking for X or looking for Y, or as a CMO, you're looking for some digital advertising, I don't know, tools or agencies and so on.
Yes.
So there is some signal and they're sort of following their signal and they're coming to you. But where have you seen actually people coming in really early, trying to give you inputs which you may or may not use that moment or that month or that quarter, but they know that sooner or later this is something which will be useful for you, and they start the engagement really early? I mean, do you have some examples of that?
I do. There's a really terrific company called Mobivity that is still owner-operator led, meaning it's entrepreneur led. It's quite successful. Mobivity has as you can imagine, a tool around tracking mobile activity, if you will. What they did was they came to my head of digital operations, not me. He went to the head of digital and said, "You don't seem to care about this capability yet, but I'd like it to be on your radar because you should." And a few months later, and he had my head of digital, terrific guy, Rob Tedesco, very capable, young and yet very experienced in a funny way. He had just been at it for a surprisingly long time. He was one of those guys who was building computers in his garage when he was 5 years old. And so he knew everything. And Rob said, "These guys have brought me something interesting that I think we should listen to." but we don't have an application for it yet. It's very difficult to deploy because we have a franchise network. You have to basically get every franchisee on board. You have to sell everything in like a democracy. But the franchisees won't like it because it will cost them money. But I think they're going to see that they would be able to serve customers better. They'd be able to know customers, and they could differentially attract customers. I said, that's interesting. Who else does that? He said, I don't know. These guys just came out of the blue. I said, well, go figure out if they're the best ones to do it, and then let's have a conversation with them. So we looked around and said, yeah, they're at least in the top three, and everybody else, they're all startups, so it's kind of a crapshoot. I think we should be betting on the one that seems to have the best funding and the smartest leadership, et cetera. I forgot about it. 2 months later, Burger King, a primary competitor, has a big news item that gets picked up by everybody. I don't even think they were publishing it particularly. That when you drove by a Burger King, your phone would light up and say, "Free Whopper, free, pull in here." They had addressed this signal so that it would ping your phone when you were pulling into McDonald's across the street. And they gave away a lot of Whoppers, but they stole a lot of Big Macs. And what they demonstrated was they really knew who their customers could be at the point of interest. Like, I'm pulling into McDonald's, like I have intent.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden I have to do a loop around. And you have these McDonald's owners who keep watching cars drive around the drive-thru and back out. Like, what's going on? Is there a detour? So they got a lot of press for that. And all of a sudden these guys came to the forefront. I was like, that's what they were talking about. So they had sort of greased the skids for us to understand that we would care about this one day, even though basically they were saying you're too dumb to get it right now, or to prioritize it and care about it. So that when the opportunity was obvious to us, we knew who to turn to. And so it was a very early introduction. And then when we turned to them, they were the most service-oriented. And he and his team are taking me for dinner and talking about where they've piloted this. They're basically giving me an update on the successes Subway is having that I don't even know about yet because it's happening on the periphery. They've sold a pilot to a franchise owner who's got a bunch of stores. They haven't even sold it to headquarters. So they've now bringing me back proof points in my own business. So I thought of that team as very savvy, very fortunate that there was a confluence of events that sort of brought it back to our attention. But they saw it was an obvious need that was a building digital capability that for sure the competitors were going to have, and I needed to be aware of it. I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely.
Came in early, planted the seed, jumped on the moment of interest, much like Burger King jumped on the person when I drove into McDonald's. Mobivity jumped on me when the Burger King news came out. And of course, they emailed it to me and said, right. Did you see this? What did I tell you? And I was delighted to get the message. I was like, yep, okay, I'm in. I get it. Now it's come pitch me, and we'll consider you against alternatives, but you're definitely in the driver's seat. I know you. You foresaw my future. You were the first one to reach out to me. I took your message because we know each other now. Of course, that's who we ended up working on.
That's a great story. The other question that I had was not related to the sales process and the buying process directly, but it was something about the way we compensate salespeople. Do you think we should actually now rethink the way we compensate our salespeople which will actually, like you said, that will set the process for them to be reoriented about the customer first and not the tool and my incentive and thereby what can I sell you this quarter or this month?
I think that how we compensate them is a secondary question. The primary question is important. So let me just say that's the way that we should think about it, because as the business, that's how you're spending money to make money. But the way that you compensate them is based on the metrics that matter. You need to say, what is the outcome I'm trying to achieve for my business? What kind of sales and what kind of time frame? Do I want trusted relationships? Do I want one-off sales? Do I want it fast or do I need it forever? And to do that, then what's the nature of the relationship I need to have with what kind of customer? How should I profile them? Who am I targeting? How and why? Now that I understand them, what is their buyer preference, process, method, range of complexity? And they then would say, okay, if I can map that out, and I realize it's never linear, but just make it simple for yourself. Say, what activities need to take place in order to achieve this outcome? And then what would I measure to demonstrate that that's happening? And then lastly, how would I compensate someone to induce those, to achieve those metrics, to achieve that outcome? So you're basically engineering it from scratch for what you're trying to accomplish. If you say, I'll pay you $1 every time you sell a pair of shoes, then you've got somebody who's flogging shoes. If you say, I will pay you every time you get 5 stars from a customer, well, that's different. What would I do if I were trying to earn 5 stars? And even in a simple example like that, you can imagine how you fundamentally change the behaviors of your staff.
Yeah.
Customer walks into the shoe store, 3 staff swarm them and try and latch onto them like a leech and, shuffle them to the most expensive pair of shoes versus, a team that over time starts to become much more fluid. They see that they are a team in achieving an optimal outcome. Maybe I should reward them as a team. Well, you're not going to get team behavior if you reward lone wolves. So change the mechanism. So the reason I was saying the compensation is secondary is because I've got a lot of machinery to figure out that basically comes down to the metrics that matter. And now I incent that by paying you to achieve them or rewarding you in some way. It's not necessarily pay. It can be your progress is based on your promotions will be based on hitting these metrics. I may pay you a flat salary, right? And what I really want are 5 stars. The Zappos model in the shoe arena is a really good example of we're just going to go for service. When they started that company, they didn't even have shoes in inventory. They just started selling pictures of shoes and then we go buy them retail and sell them at a loss so that they can learn what customers wanted.
True.
Understand the customer. Critical.
This is one problem that needs discussion, which is how do you incentivize and should you at all incentivize individuals? Because what's wrong with the marketing guy who is doing a great job? What's wrong with the production guy who is producing this great?
Yeah, why don't we do this with sales guys? Yeah.
Exactly. That's the point.
That's a very good point.
Right?
Yeah.
So should we incentivize the entire company if we have done a good year's job or a good quarter's job? Or should we just incentivize those guys who are going out and getting revenue? What is so different about the guys who are getting revenue vis-a-vis the guys who are designing a new product?
It is a strange thing that, quota-driven and bonus-based selling became the model in just one function.
Yeah.
You're right. We don't do it for the car designer. But if you design the car that becomes the most popular car in the world, you do have benefits, but they're much more obscure. And it's very interesting.
I think this is a function of the industrial era where we figured out mass manufacturing first and then we wanted to go and sell it. We never knew who is going to buy it and how they're going to buy it and so on.
Right,
So I think it has a link to that I suddenly have 100,000 pieces of X and I have produced it for Y pennies or dollars. Now I need to figure out how to sell it at Y plus whatever. And whoever does it best, I will incentivize you to do that and do it by hook or by crook. And that's okay. I think sort of that legacy is sort of continuing, but we'll, as you said, we'll leave it for another discussion, and we must talk again. We must talk again, Roger. I really appreciate your time. I enjoyed chatting with you, and I hope you did too.
Very much. Thank you very much. I think it's a very useful exercise that you're engaged in here. I think we have a lot of work to do to transform the relationship between companies and customers by really helping people think differently about what is an outdated model, in my view.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Meet Vijayanand, the global head procurement Tata Technologies. TTL is a Tata Motors company providing engineering, R&D, and consulting services to automotive and aerospace industries. He's a senior supply chain executive with 20 years of experience in brand consulting, category management, procurement outsourcing, and implementation of S2P solutions. Vijayanand has worked with varied industries like IT, ITES, retail, and manufacturing, and has been adding value by improving operational efficiencies, cost optimization, and consulting in the space of procurement, SCM, and branding.
Earlier all the purchasing persons were accountant, and the accountant would have had a different career motive of growing into some other accounting area or department or whatever. But when it comes to supply chain nowadays, he wants to grow and be a chief supply chain officer and get a seat at the table, become more strategic, and even try to be a CEO one day, right? In such a scenario, obviously there is a community. Like there could be a community of CFOs, the community of practitioners, community of salespeople who have different sales needs, right? Similarly, the community of procurement has also evolved. You know, Today when I speak to you, we run ISM Bangalore chapter, we run a blockchain supply chain practice chapter, we run a procurement practice chapter. And this is not only regional; it has gone to the level of collaborating across the geographies, across nations.
And finally, here is Ross Schaefer on 30 seconds to customer experience greatness.
This is Maria Garcia. I met her 6 years ago at the Orlando Marriott. I have been traveling back and forth across the country. I was exhausted, tired, midnight, hungry. First thing I do is I reach for that room service menu. See a picture of a mushroom bacon cheeseburger, which, as you know, is perfect for late night dining. So I get a Diet Coke to offset the effect. And it comes up in 20 minutes. That was less time than they said, and the picture didn't even do justice to this amazing hamburger, and the steak fries were golden brown, perfect, everything's so hot. But she brought me a Diet Pepsi. And I don't like Diet Pepsi. I'm fussy about that one thing. I like Diet Coke better than, then they say, well, here's a lime, you can put a lime in there, maybe it tastes like a Diet. You can put lime, buttons, cigarettes, doesn't matter what you put in there. It isn't going to be a Diet Coke. But there was ice water. I said, that's fine, thank you. Oh, I'm so sorry, we apologize, we're out of these in the room service kitchen and big convention and something. It's okay, it's like 12:20 now, and thank you very much for bringing this, and I appreciate it. She leaves. Not even 30 seconds later, bam, 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 she's knocking on my door with an ice cold Diet Coke. So now I'm suspicious. Where'd that come from? She said, I found this 4 floors down in a machine, thought you'd like to have it. I know, I'm a grown man, I did the same thing. Oh, let me pay for that. She wouldn't take my money. Would not take my money. No, just make sure you're happy here, Mr. Schaefer. She leaves. I'm just stunned. Because look what's happened from her 30-second effort down to the machine. She's created me as an unpaid spokesperson for Maria Garcia and the Marriott Hotels. I've told that to probably hundreds of thousands of people by now in 6 years. Why are we not in that business? Why are we not creating such an unforgettable experience that is emotional, that causes other people to talk about us and other people to accelerate our careers? That's the business we should be in. It's good for them, good for us.
That is the way to build a brand, be remarkable. That's a wrap for today, friends. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay well and convert more.